Wait, okay, we will get there, but Junseth, before we go to what kind of more cosmic with this conversation, I wanted to circle back. One, you said you had a question that you'd ask Satoshi if you met him. I want to hear what that is. And then two, you mentioned this kind of backstory that you were the original Bitcoin maximalist, and to kind of finish out this thread about like what's changed over time with Bitcoin, so that people's worldview has shifted. Like, you know, you were the Bitcoin maximalist before there was even a need for such a term. And, you know, at a time when, let's say, like I'm a Bitcoin maximalist because I've seen everything go wrong. And so over time, like my naivety has been exploited. And now it's like, I have no naivety left. I'm like maximally cynical. And that's why I'm like now a Bitcoin maximalist. But like with you had this worldview back when Ethereum was still an inkling and there was no track record of booms and busts. Like there wasn't a track record of all the failures that there are now to be able to kind of hang your hat on and be like, you know, this is why this is doomed. So talk to me about like, how did y'all see that as so obvious so early?
Yeah, so you're wrong. You're wrong. There were a shit ton of booms and busts, and we recognized them early. You know, whether it was what's the Dan Larimer one?
BitShares.
BitShares. There were tons and tons of them.
Yeah.
And I mean the reality is, Dan, I mean I've thought a lot about Bitcoin and what it reduces to, and I think that the fact is that the hash function is an important function. It really does. It is a receipt for how much energy is burned. So like once you realize that all of these chains are in competition for exactly the same resource. And yeah, like once you realize
I like that.
Yeah, that's for example, like when people talk about like, oh, you know, diversity is good in terms of number of layer one chains because that decreases like going concern risk for the whole space. I'm like, actually, no, it's the opposite.
Correct.
The more chains you have, the less proof of work you have consolidated into one chain, aka the less security spend you have. So like actually, it's very unlikely we'll see more than a few chains long term, very, very long term, have enough security spend through transaction fees alone to be an adequate, you know, payment to the miners where they won't feel, you know, and that they won't have a secondary economic incentive to reorganize transactions. Like basically only Bitcoin and Ethereum have that.
Dan's got it. He's up here in my screen, but he's probably in a different spot on YouTube.
You're above me in my screen, so.
Nice.
You know, I just interpret it as Dan is number one. So good job. So Junseth, like, talk a little bit more about just like the, you know.
Well, like, let me talk a little bit about smart contracts, because I think that people don't like the idea that like decentralized smart contracts matter is, in my opinion, absolute insanity. Because the only thing that really matters with regard to smart contract, I mean, like if you want to reduce what a smart contract is a multi-sig wallet. That is all it is. There's no difference between a multi-sig wallet and a smart contract. And the only thing that is interesting about the function of a smart contract is the oracle. So when Ethereum begins proposing like, you know, decentralized smart contract space that they're going to have on the chain, my question is, how do you decentralize the oracle? And you literally cannot. So there's nothing interesting about Ethereum. And that's the only project I think that has sort of given Bitcoin a run for its money over the years. Every other project reduces to energy and or sort of this like proof of work function. So to me, when I look at the space, my question is, what's interesting about it? What is different about this? What is unique? What is value add in the space? And there's literally almost nothing that I can think of that is value add. Not in DeFi, not in Ethereum, not in smart contracts. There's nothing that's really that interesting. And I'm the one with my shirt off, so I shouldn't be the only one saying that.
So beautifully said, but I will point out one interesting feature it has is that you don't get shut down by the CFTC and FBI if you sprinkle a little bit of DeFi on it. So
all they have to do is shut out the oracle.
Say it again.
All they have to do is shut down the oracle.
Yeah, but they don't. They don't.
The oracle problem is a huge problem. I mean,
the oracle problem is the only interesting problem in the space. Like, Why Ethereum is uninteresting until the Oracle problem is solved. And here's the thing: once the Oracle problem is solved, and that's not what Ethereum solves, despite what people think. Once the Oracle problem is solved, you can import that solution to Bitcoin. So you don't need an Ethereum. You don't need anything else. Like Bitcoin maximalism at its core, like I think Vitalik called us Bitcoin maximalists. And I think he's astute and correct in calling us that. But because he's naming a thing that exists, which is that like there are people that believe Bitcoin will reign supreme at some point. And I've thought a lot about like what that means. And what it really means is that like there are people who believe in a probabilistic world where Bitcoin wins. And I can tell you all the reasons I think Bitcoin wins. Number one, I think that Bitcoin wins because the hash algorithm is the least fucked with. It's the most transparent, obvious hash algorithm. It's the most understood, the most understood algorithm for the hash function, which means that there's not a lot of rigmarole that needs to be gone through in order to like do hashing. It's very obvious. And every inch of rigmarole is what we call risk. And a risk in a financial sense is what we call cost, right? So that's the number one reason why like mining Bitcoin is the cheapest coin to mine over time. It doesn't have to always be that way. It doesn't have to start out that way. Like you look at a lot of these charts of like profitability and mining of any of these coins, and you have like Ethereum way up here and Bitcoin way down here at the time that Ethereum launches, but they all regress asymptotically towards zero. So which means that they move closer and closer to zero, because mining is a perfectly competitive market. And if you think about it like that, there's never been a market quite like mining. Mining is this market where you submit your transaction, and anybody, regardless of who they are, regardless of what they've done, can mine your transaction. They can be a pedophile. They can be a prisoner. They can be any sort of like terrible thing. They could be a Nazi, anything. And if they win the hash, they mine your transaction. There's nothing you can do about it. You buy their service.
The only thing like it is photosynthesis.
Or well, photosynthesis or maybe like farming. Farming might be the closest the closest analogy. It doesn't matter who farms your food. It doesn't matter who mines your Bitcoin. Anybody can do it. So what that means is that because everything is competing for the same resource, all of these chains are going to grow closer and closer in terms of profitability to zero, which means that Bitcoin, given that it is the least complex of any of these algorithms, is going to be the only profitable one left standing.
I'm not sure that the complexity of the algorithm is really what sets Bitcoin apart. I'd say that it has to do more with like the whole culture that developed, and it just has like this whole kind of like myth, the founding myth, and the consensus process, and the way that everyone just kind of and the economic incentives that drive everyone to support one chain.
I mean, I agree with you, Eric. I think that all of that is very important in terms of like the base support that Bitcoin has. I'm just talking about the economics of Bitcoin, why there is eventually only going to be one chain. Like you're correct in that, in building a narrative and building marketing, like all of that works. But Ethereum has better marketing. So when all is said and done, the question is who has better economics? Because like you can market all you want. Eventually, at some point, miners are going to ask the question, which chain do I make the most money mining?
No, but the thing is, Ethereum doesn't have the same kind of decentralized, founding kind of, Satoshi walking away was like a genius move. Basically, it
the greatest thing that ever happened to Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what really sets Bitcoin apart, I think, is that the founder actually left. If the founder sticks around, that actually dooms the project.
Yeah, because he could be arrested. Do you remember when Vitalik was rumored to be dead? Can we talk about the DAO?
He gave the picture, the proof of life picture.
Oh,
man. Can we talk about the DAO? Because like I think all of us lived that, and I think modern Bitcoiners do not remember the DAO.